In the heart of the Arabian Peninsula, long before the rise of cities and empires, the vast desert stretched endlessly under a burning sun, dotted with oases that were the lifeblood of the people who called this arid land home. The winds carried tales of wandering merchants, tribes bound by loyalty and blood, and a mosaic of beliefs that reflected centuries of contact with distant civilizations. Imagine a world where caravans traversed treacherous sands, where trade connected the bustling markets of Yemen with the rich cities of Syria and Iraq, and where every oasis could be both a haven and a battleground. It is in this landscape, with its harsh climate and intricate social webs, that the story of one of the world's major religions begins. The Arabian Peninsula before Islam was far from a blank slate. It was a place of contrasts, harsh deserts interrupted by fertile valleys, sprawling trade routes intersecting with tribal territories, and a society organized not by kings or empires, but by clans and tribal alliances. Each tribe was fiercely independent, its honor and survival tied to complex codes of loyalty and revenge. Conflicts were frequent, and yet the same networks that brought strife also facilitated commerce and cultural exchange. The southern reaches of Arabia had long been influenced by the civilizations of the Fertile Crescent, while northern caravans carried knowledge, languages, and religious ideas from Mesopotamia, Syria, and beyond. Jews and Christians had established communities in towns and oasis settlements, bringing scriptures, traditions, and moral philosophies that would ripple through the coming centuries. Yet, despite these influences, much of Arabia remained polytheistic, with gods and goddesses representing natural forces and celestial bodies, venerated in rituals that were often local and deeply personal. Sacred stones and shrines stood as symbols of divine presence, and Mecca, already a significant trading hub, was a spiritual center as well, housing the Kaaba, which contained hundreds of idols representing these deities. Life in this environment demanded resilience. Water was precious, survival depended on alliances, and the desert's unpredictability shaped the values of the people. Hospitality and honor were paramount, yet so too were cycles of vengeance and tribal warfare. Yet, within this crucible of challenge and opportunity, seeds were being sown for profound change. It was a world both ordinary and extraordinary, ordinary in its struggles and routines, extraordinary in the spiritual and historical significance it would soon acquire. The stories of merchants, warriors, and poets intertwined with the whispers of revelations yet to come, laying the stage for a narrative that would reshape the course of history. Among the people of Mecca, a city at the crossroads of trade and pilgrimage, lived a man who would alter the spiritual landscape of Arabia and beyond. Born into the Quraysh tribe, he entered a society marked by both prosperity and inequality, reverence for tradition and a yearning for moral clarity. From his earliest years, his life was shaped by loss and hardship, orphaned at a young age, yet raised with care within a network of relatives who recognized his contemplative nature. He witnessed firsthand the disparities of his society, the tribal rivalries, and the spiritual yearning of people seeking meaning in a world dominated by commerce, idols, and fleeting pleasures. As he matured, he became known for his integrity, earning the title of Al-Amin, the trustworthy. He engaged in trade, traveling with caravans across Arabia and even beyond, encountering diverse peoples, cultures, and religious ideas. These journeys exposed him to the ethical frameworks of Judaism and Christianity, the structured monotheism of their teachings, and the moral questions that had long preoccupied thinkers across the region. Yet amidst this exposure, he remained deeply troubled by the moral and spiritual state of his own society, sensing a profound need for reform and guidance that extended beyond commerce or tribal loyalties. It was during one of these periods of reflection, in the solitude of a cave on the outskirts of Mecca, that he began receiving revelations that would form the foundation of a new spiritual path. These revelations, delivered over decades, called for the worship of a single transcendent God, emphasizing justice, compassion, and accountability. His message challenged established hierarchies, disrupted entrenched practices, and attracted both followers and fierce opposition. Early converts were drawn from among the marginalized, the poor, and the socially disadvantaged, individuals who resonated with the promise of spiritual equality and moral responsibility. Yet those in positions of power saw in this growing movement a threat to economic, political, and social stability, resulting in persecution, ostracization, and at times violent suppression. The story of this early community is not one of unbroken triumph, but of struggle and resilience. Followers endured social exile, economic boycotts, and even imprisonment, testing their commitment and shaping the identity of the nascent faith. Among these followers were women and men who displayed extraordinary courage, their lives intertwined with both the triumphs and controversies of the era. It is important to understand that some practices of the time, such as the marriage of young girls or military campaigns against opposing tribes, were situated within a historical context that differed greatly from modern ethical frameworks. These practices, while controversial to contemporary observers, were part of the broader norms of 7th century Arabian society and played a role in the consolidation and survival of the early community. As the movement grew, strategic decisions became necessary. Migration to Medina, a city receptive to his teachings, marked a turning point, transforming a persecuted group into a socio-political entity capable of self-governance. There, treaties were negotiated, new laws were implemented, and the community established systems for justice, defense, and public welfare. Yet even as society was structured around these ideals, conflicts emerged. Battles with opposing tribes, both defensive and offensive, shaped the political landscape and influenced perceptions of justice and authority. Non-believers and dissenters were sometimes subjected to harsh measures, reflecting both the turbulent context and the pressures faced by a fledgling society seeking survival. These events, while unsettling, provide insight into the challenges of establishing a new religious and political order in a world where allegiances were constantly tested and life was precarious. Through these trials, the early Muslim community began to consolidate power, spread its influence across Arabia, and establish practices that would define Islamic society. Leadership was exercised not only through spiritual authority, but through governance, military strategy, and law, shaping a system that would endure long after the passing of its founder. Alongside these developments, intellectual and moral teachings were codified, emphasizing charity, justice, and ethical conduct, providing a framework that would guide countless generations. The story of this era is a tapestry of achievement and controversy, of visionary ideas and human imperfection, illustrating the complexity of history itself. The journey from Mecca to Medina was not merely a physical migration, but a profound turning point that transformed the community from a marginalized group into a structured society with political, social, and spiritual dimensions. Leaving behind the city that had been both home and battleground, the early Muslims traversed the desert under the cover of night, evading those who sought to harm them. The Hijra, as it came to be known, was a moment that symbolized both survival and renewal, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Islam. In Medina, the Prophet was not only a spiritual guide, but also a political leader, tasked with uniting a diverse population of tribes, reconciling rivalries, and establishing laws that would govern both believers and non-believers alike. The Medina period showcased both the visionary aspects of leadership and the pragmatic challenges of governance. Alliances were formed and sometimes tested, treaties negotiated, and the distribution of resources carefully managed. The early Muslims were required to navigate a delicate balance between moral ideals and political realities. They implemented rules to regulate social behavior, trade, inheritance, and community welfare, establishing precedents that would echo throughout Islamic history. Yet even as these innovations provided stability, the community faced external threats and internal tensions. Tribes that had resisted the Prophet's message in Mecca now posed military challenges, and Medina itself was not immune to disputes among its residents. Conflict, while often framed as defensive, inevitably shaped the community's identity and the ethical questions surrounding its actions. Battles such as Badr, Uhud, and the Trench were fought with strategic acumen, but they also involved decisions that had profound consequences for non-combatants and captives. Some tribes who opposed the early Muslims faced execution, exile, or confiscation of property, and while these actions were justified in historical sources as measures to secure the survival of the fledgling state, they remain controversial in modern discussions. These events illuminate the harsh realities of 7th century Arabia, where survival often required difficult choices, and highlight the tension between spiritual principles and political necessity. Alongside these military and political developments, societal practices that are now considered ethically problematic were part of the community's daily life. Marriage to young girls, including the Prophet's marriage to Aisha, must be understood within the norms of 7th century Arabia, where such unions were socially accepted and often politically strategic, intended to solidify alliances and ensure the welfare of families. Present-day perspectives view these practices very differently, yet historically they were embedded within the broader social and cultural fabric. Similarly, the treatment of prisoners and conquered peoples, including imposition of taxes on non-Muslims and occasional forced conversions, reflected both the challenges of governance and the ethical frameworks of the time. Acknowledging these realities allows for a balanced understanding of history without excusing actions by contemporary moral standards. Despite these controversies, the Medina period was also a time of remarkable innovation and consolidation. The early Muslims established a system of communal welfare, providing for the needy, orphans and widows. Education and moral instruction were emphasized, with the recitations that would become the Quran offering guidance on ethics, law, and spirituality. The community fostered a sense of unity, identity, and purpose, transforming disparate individuals into a cohesive society capable of enduring immense pressures. These achievements laid the groundwork for the rapid expansion that would follow, as the early Muslim state developed both the moral authority and the practical means to extend its influence beyond the Arabian Peninsula. By the time the Prophet passed away, the foundations of a vast and ambitious movement had been established. Leadership transitioned to the first caliph, Abu Bakr, whose task was to preserve the fragile unity of the community while continuing its expansion. The Rashidun caliphs, as they came to be known, faced both internal dissent and external threats, navigating the delicate politics of succession, governance, and conquest. Military campaigns continued, extending the reach of the Muslim state into territories such as Persia, the Levant, and Egypt. These expansions brought both opportunities and ethical dilemmas, as conquered populations encountered new rulers, taxation systems, and religious expectations. Historical accounts describe instances of violence against resisting groups, yet also note periods of relative tolerance, coexistence, and integration. The achievements of this era were significant. Administrative structures were established, markets regulated, and legal principles codified, providing a model for future Islamic governance. Intellectual pursuits flourished as scholars engaged with philosophy, science, medicine, and literature, building on knowledge inherited from previous civilizations. Yet the period was not without its controversies. Civil wars, assassinations, and disputes over rightful leadership exposed the fragility of political unity, while some policies, including heavy taxation on non-Muslims and the suppression of dissent, highlight the moral complexities inherent in empire building. These historical realities underscore that the story of Islam's rise is neither uniformly heroic nor uniformly condemnable, but a nuanced tapestry of human ambition, belief, and circumstance. After the passing of the Prophet, the nascent Muslim community faced a moment of profound uncertainty. The unity that had been painstakingly forged in Medina was fragile, and the question of succession loomed large. Abu Bakr, a close companion and trusted advisor of the Prophet, assumed the mantle of leadership, becoming the first caliph. His tenure, though brief, was defined by urgent challenges. Some tribes refused to pay zakat, the obligatory alms, while others sought to break away from the fledgling Islamic State. Abu Bakr's decisive actions, often referred to as the Ridda Wars, restored cohesion through both diplomacy and force. While some viewed these measures as necessary to preserve the integrity of the community, others highlight that the campaigns involved killing those who resisted, a reminder that political consolidation in a turbulent era often required harsh measures. Abu Bakr's leadership laid the groundwork for the rapid expansion that would characterize the Rashidun period. His successor, Umar ibn al-Khattab, oversaw conquests that stretched the boundaries of the Islamic State far beyond Arabia. Under his rule, Muslim armies moved into the Sasanian Empire and Byzantine territories, capturing lands in Persia, the Levant, and Egypt. These campaigns were strategically brilliant, often combining swift military action with negotiated settlements and treaties. Non-Muslim populations in conquered territories were generally allowed to maintain their religious practices, albeit with new restrictions and taxes such as the jizya, which symbolized their subordinate political status. While the early caliphs often emphasized justice and fairness, these campaigns nonetheless involved violence, including the deaths of those who resisted conquest and the appropriation of property, reflecting the harsh realities of empire building. Umar's administration also brought remarkable achievements in governance and public policy. He established administrative divisions, appointed governors, and developed mechanisms for taxation and public welfare. Roads, canals, and markets were regulated, facilitating trade and economic growth. Scholars often note that under Umar, a sense of civic responsibility and institutional organization emerged, setting a precedent for future Islamic governance. Yet alongside these accomplishments, the period also witnessed controversial decisions, such as the strict enforcement of laws and punitive measures against rebels or dissenters, which, though aimed at maintaining stability, sometimes resulted in suffering for ordinary people caught in political struggles. The third caliph, Uthman ibn Affan, oversaw a period of relative expansion and internal tension. He is credited with commissioning an official codification of the Quran, an act of lasting religious and cultural significance that helped unify the Muslim community. However, Uthman's rule was marked by allegations of nepotism and favoritism, particularly in appointments to key positions, which fueled discontent among certain factions. This internal strife culminated in his assassination, a violent act that shocked the Muslim world and underscored the delicate balance between authority, justice, and the expectations of a diverse population. The events of Uthman's caliphate reveal the human vulnerabilities inherent in leadership and the difficulty of balancing ethical governance with political expediency. Ali ibn Abi Talib, the fourth caliph, inherited a community fractured by both internal disputes and external threats. His reign was characterized by civil wars, including the battles of the Camel and Siffin, which were fought against fellow Muslims. These conflicts, often seen as ideological as well as political, resulted in significant loss of life and highlighted the complexities of succession, loyalty, and governance in a rapidly expanding empire. Ali's leadership emphasized moral integrity and justice, yet even he faced the harsh realities of maintaining authority in a time of division. The period of his rule also gave rise to the early Sunni-Shia split, a division that would have profound historical and cultural consequences. Throughout the Rashidun Caliphate, the expansion of Islam brought both remarkable achievements and difficult ethical questions. The spread of the faith was not only military, but also administrative and cultural. Newly conquered regions were integrated through systems of taxation, legal frameworks, and social policies, and in many areas, local elites were co-opted into governance structures. Yet the imposition of political authority, coupled with religious expectations, inevitably led to resistance, violence, and ethical dilemmas. Prisoners of war, dissenting tribes, and minority communities sometimes faced harsh treatment, and the balance between survival justice and ethical conduct was constantly tested. At the same time, the Rashidun period produced enduring contributions. Intellectual inquiry, scholarship, and the codification of laws advanced rapidly. Principles of justice, welfare, and governance were articulated and implemented, forming the foundation for later Islamic civilization. Cities like Kufa, Basra, and Fustat became centers of learning, commerce, and culture, reflecting the dynamic interplay of conquest and civilization building. Trade networks expanded, connecting distant regions and facilitating the flow of goods, ideas, and technologies. The juxtaposition of military conquest with intellectual and cultural growth highlights the complexity of this era. It was a time of both innovation and conflict, of ethical ambition and human imperfection. This period also set patterns that would continue into the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates. The challenge of governing a diverse and expansive empire, the integration of non-Muslim populations, and the tension between political authority and moral ideals. While the Rashidun caliphs sought to balance these forces, their actions, both commendable and controversial, left a lasting imprint on the trajectory of Islamic history. Understanding this era requires acknowledging both the achievements such as effective governance, cultural flourishing, and the unification of a vast region, and the controversies, including violence against opponents, internal civil wars, and policies that imposed hardship on certain populations. Following the era of the Rashidun Caliphate, the Islamic world entered a new phase under the Umayyad dynasty, whose leadership marked both unprecedented territorial expansion and deepening social complexities. The Umayyads established their capital in Damascus, a city that became the nerve center of administration, trade, and culture. From this hub, Muslim armies advanced across North Africa, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar into Spain, and pressed eastward into Central Asia, creating one of the largest empires the world had yet seen. These campaigns were executed with strategic brilliance, often leveraging local alliances and knowledge of terrain, yet they were also accompanied by bloodshed, particularly in regions that resisted conquest. Non-Muslim populations were usually permitted to retain their faith, but they were subject to the jizya tax and at times other social restrictions, reflecting both the pragmatism and coercion inherent in the governance of a sprawling empire. The Umayyads' rule brought remarkable administrative and infrastructural achievements. Roads were constructed and maintained, markets regulated, and regional governors appointed to oversee distant provinces. Coinage and taxation systems were standardized, facilitating trade across continents. Cultural life flourished as well. Arabic became the lingua franca of administration and scholarship, fostering intellectual exchange, literature, and the arts. Architectural innovation thrived, with mosques, palaces, and civic buildings reflecting both Islamic aesthetics and the influences of conquered civilizations. These accomplishments highlight the duality of this period, an empire expanding in size and sophistication, yet reliant on force, coercion, and political hierarchy to maintain order. At the same time, internal tensions simmered. The Umayyad emphasis on centralized authority and the privileging of certain families in governance led to discontent among non-Arab Muslims, particularly in Persia and North Africa. Revolts erupted, often brutally suppressed, demonstrating the challenges of balancing political consolidation with fairness and representation. Civil unrest, allegations of corruption, and sectarian divides exposed the vulnerabilities of imperial rule and underscored the human cost of maintaining a vast empire. While the Umayyads contributed to the stability and spread of Islam, these controversies illustrate that political achievement was inseparable from social and ethical challenges. The transition to the Abbasid Caliphate brought both continuity and transformation. The Abbasids moved the capital to Baghdad, a city that rapidly became a global center of commerce, learning, and culture. Under their rule, the Islamic world experienced a golden age of intellectual, scientific, and artistic achievement. Scholars translated works from Greek, Persian, and Indian sources, advancing mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Libraries, observatories, and universities flourished, demonstrating that the expansion of the empire was matched by an expansion of human knowledge. Trade routes connected Baghdad to distant cities from China to Spain, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and culture. Yet even as intellectual life blossomed, the Abbasid period was not free from conflict or controversy. Civil wars, succession disputes, and regional revolts challenged the authority of the caliphs, sometimes resulting in harsh crackdowns and violence. Non-Muslim populations continued to pay special taxes, and certain groups faced social and legal restrictions, reflecting ongoing tensions in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire. At the same time, debates about governance, justice, and ethical practice thrived, with scholars and jurists analyzing and critiquing both contemporary policies and historical precedent. These discussions reveal that the Abbasid era, like those before it, was defined by the interplay of achievement and controversy, innovation and conflict, moral aspiration, and pragmatic necessity. The expansion of Islam during the Umayyad and Abbasid periods also had profound cultural and global consequences. Architecture, literature, and scientific advancements not only enriched Muslim societies, but also influenced Europe, Africa, and Asia for centuries. Cities like Cordoba, Cairo, and Samarkand became centers of learning and culture, their libraries and institutions shaping the intellectual heritage of humanity. At the same time, the ethical dilemmas and conflicts of these eras, the treatment of conquered peoples, the enforcement of religious law, and the internal political struggles serve as a reminder that the spread of civilization is rarely without cost. In considering the Umayyad and Abbasid legacies, it is clear that the expansion of Islam was a complex, multifaceted process. It involved military conquest and political maneuvering, intellectual flourishing and artistic innovation, social organization, and ethical controversy. The duality of progress and conflict, achievement and moral ambiguity is woven throughout this history, illustrating that human societies are rarely simple or unambiguous. The story of this period, with all its triumphs and challenges, offers a window into the dynamic interplay between power, belief, and human aspiration. The influence of Islam on world history extends far beyond the boundaries of the Arabian Peninsula or the territories governed by the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates. The expansion of the Islamic world facilitated unprecedented connections between East and West, creating networks of trade, knowledge, and culture that spanned continents. Caravans and ships carried not only spices, textiles, and precious metals, but also ideas, scientific knowledge, and philosophical thought. Baghdad's House of Wisdom became a beacon of scholarship, where Greek, Persian, Indian, and other ancient texts were translated into Arabic, preserved, and expanded upon. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and chemistry advanced in ways that would shape both Islamic societies and, centuries later, the European Renaissance. Architecture and art flourished as well. Magnificent mosques, palaces, and libraries reflected both spiritual devotion and aesthetic sophistication, blending indigenous styles with the influences of conquered regions. Calligraphy, intricate geometric patterns, and illuminated manuscripts became hallmarks of Islamic culture, symbolizing a civilization that valued intellectual and artistic achievement. Cities such as Cordoba in Spain, Cairo in Egypt, and Samarkand in Central Asia became global centers of learning and culture, where scholars, merchants, and travelers exchanged ideas across linguistic, religious, and ethnic boundaries. The movement of knowledge along trade routes helped to create a cosmopolitan intellectual world, one in which innovations in medicine, mathematics, and philosophy traveled thousands of miles to influence distant civilizations. Yet the story of Islam's impact on world history is not limited to its contributions. The expansion of the faith and its political systems often entailed forceful integration, including military campaigns, imposition of taxes on non-Muslims, and sometimes the suppression of dissent. These measures, while often justified as necessary for political and social cohesion, illustrate the tension between human ambition and ethical ideals. In some regions, resistance was met with violence, and local populations were compelled to navigate new social and legal hierarchies. Even as Muslim rulers promoted education, science, and cultural exchange, the methods by which political authority was maintained often involved coercion and conflict. Ethical debates also accompanied the administration of vast, multi-ethnic empires. Questions arose about justice, governance, and the treatment of minority communities, and scholars of the time wrestled with these issues in ways that continue to inform Islamic thought. The balance between moral principles and political necessity was a constant concern, from the enforcement of laws in Medina to the regulation of sprawling territories under the Abbasids. These discussions reveal a civilization grappling with the same dilemmas that confront all societies: how to wield power responsibly, how to ensure justice, and how to integrate diverse populations under a coherent system of governance. The trade networks established by the early Muslim empires further amplified their global impact. Routes stretching from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean and from Central Asia to West Africa facilitated not only commerce, but also cultural and intellectual exchange. Innovations in navigation, banking, and commercial law spread alongside goods, creating interdependent economies and fostering cross-cultural understanding. These exchanges shaped the development of scientific knowledge, agricultural practices, and artistic techniques in regions far beyond the Islamic world. At the same time, The economic and political dominance of Islamic empires sometimes disrupted local power structures, imposed new hierarchies, and occasionally led to exploitation or inequality. Culturally, Islam influenced literature, philosophy, and ethics in ways that resonate to this day. The preservation and reinterpretation of classical texts, the development of jurisprudence, and the flourishing of poetry and storytelling enriched global intellectual heritage. Yet the legacy is complex. While Islamic civilization advanced learning and fostered unprecedented connectivity, it also imposed strict social hierarchies, challenged existing religious traditions, and enforced laws and practices that would be viewed as controversial by modern standards. This duality, the coexistence of remarkable achievement with ethical and political tension, is a defining feature of the historical impact of Islam. In examining Islam's role in world history, one sees a civilization that both shaped and was shaped by the societies it touched. Its expansion brought scientific and cultural innovations, established enduring trade networks, and created cities of extraordinary learning and beauty. At the same time, the processes of conquest, governance, and social control remind us that historical progress is rarely linear or uncomplicated. Military campaigns, taxation policies, and enforcement of social norms highlight the human costs of empire building, while the achievements in scholarship, art, and governance demonstrate the potential of human creativity and vision. The story of Islam's rise and expansion, therefore, is not a tale of unmitigated triumph or unbroken oppression, but a rich, multifaceted history that reflects both the highest aspirations and the challenging realities of human society. Looking back over the centuries, the rise and expansion of Islam emerges as a story of extraordinary human ambition, spiritual insight, and cultural achievement, interwoven with moments of conflict, controversy, and moral complexity. From the deserts of Arabia, where a small persecuted community took root to the vast empires of the Umayyads and Abbasids, Islam transformed societies, reshaped trade networks, and fostered intellectual and artistic flourishing that would resonate across continents for generations. The teachings, practices, and institutions established in this era laid the foundations for a civilization capable of both remarkable innovation and, at times, harsh enforcement of authority. The narrative of Islam's rise is neither one of unbroken triumph nor unmitigated fault. The early Muslim community achieved cohesion and resilience in the face of persecution, creating a system of governance and moral guidance that would endure and expand. Leaders such as Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali navigated unprecedented challenges, combining spiritual authority with political responsibility, often making decisions that were pragmatic, ethically complex, or controversial by modern standards. Practices such as early marriage, military campaigns against dissenting tribes, and taxation policies for non-Muslims illustrate the tension between historical norms and contemporary moral frameworks, reminding us that the past cannot be judged solely through present-day lenses. At the same time, the Islamic civilization that emerged contributed profoundly to world history. Scientific inquiry, philosophy, literature, architecture, and trade all flourished under Islamic rule, leaving a legacy that continues to shape global culture. Cities became hubs of knowledge and innovation, libraries preserved and expanded upon the learning of previous civilizations, and trade networks connected distant peoples in ways previously unimaginable. These accomplishments, alongside the social, legal, and intellectual developments of the early caliphates, highlight the enduring human capacity for creativity, organization, and cultural synthesis. Yet, the story of Islam's rise also invites reflection on the complexities of power, morality, and human society. The expansion of empires inevitably brought conflict, coercion, and ethical dilemmas. Leaders faced decisions that weighed survival, unity, and political authority against ideals of justice and compassion. The interplay of achievement and controversy in Islamic history mirrors the broader human experience, where progress is often accompanied by struggle and moral aspiration coexists with imperfection. Understanding this duality allows us to appreciate the richness of history while maintaining a nuanced perspective that acknowledges both contributions and shortcomings, Ultimately, the history of Islam's beginnings and expansion is a testament to the transformative power of ideas, belief, and human agency. It challenges us to consider how communities navigate adversity, how civilizations grow and interact, and how moral and ethical considerations shape and are shaped by historical circumstance. As we reflect on this story, we are reminded that history is rarely simple. It is a tapestry of triumphs and failures, of inspiration and controversy, and of human lives lived in the pursuit of survival, meaning, and progress. The legacy of Islam, like that of all civilizations, is a mirror reflecting both the heights humanity can achieve and the challenges inherent in wielding power and shaping society. What lessons, then, can we draw from this story? Perhaps it is that understanding history requires patience, empathy, and a willingness to confront complexity, that achievements and controversies are often intertwined, and that the moral questions faced by societies in the past can illuminate the ethical dilemmas of our own time. The rise and expansion of Islam, with all its brilliance and all its challenges, invites us to explore these questions, to learn from the past, and to appreciate the intricate web of human history that continues to shape the world we inhabit today.